I said this last week, but I want to reiterate a couple things because if you missed it or if you need a refresher course, it probably doesn't hurt to say this a couple times. You probably can't say this enough. So I'll just put it out there, okay? There are, in our world, too many people who are known for what they're against. There are too many organizations who are known for what they're against. And there are too many churches who are known for what they're against. We want to be a church, and we want to be people who are known for what we are for and for who we are for. That's what Jesus was known for. He was known for who he's for, and we want to be too. And so last week, we started to explain what that looks like. We started to explain what it means to be a church that's known not for what we're against, but for what we're for and for who we're for. And we started by talking about what it looks like to be for the one. In other words, what does it look like to be for people who are far from Jesus and who need a little hope in their lives? So we started to unpack the meaning of that. And we introduced some pretty big things last week. For example, we introduced a brand new mission statement for our church. And if you missed it, I want to let you know what this mission statement is because it literally calls out why we exist. It's simply this: we exist here at First Christian Church. We're here to reach out with unconditional love to all people and lead them to be all-in disciples of Jesus. That's what we're here for. If we're ever about anything else, we should just close our doors. That's the mission right there. It comes right out of Matthew chapter 28, where Jesus says, go into all nations, go to all people, in other words, and make disciples, baptize them, and teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. In other words, train them up so they can go do the same thing. We took that and we put it in our own words, and that's where that mission statement comes from, to reach out with unconditional love to all people and lead them to become all-in disciples of Jesus. But we have to put some handles on that because that statement might look good on a page on our website if somebody clicks there to see what we're all about, but what does it mean? And how do we do that? We said we got to go a little further. And so we took a verse from Matthew chapter 4, specifically verse 19, where Jesus gave a simple invitation to some guys who he was asking to come and follow him and be a part of the work he was going to do. He sees them out on a boat one day and he just says, hey, come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. In other words, I'm going to give you something way more important to do. And so we broke that verse down in three parts. We said we see three different pieces of that call. First of all, when Jesus said, come follow me, he was inviting us to do just that, to know and follow him. But then he says, and I will make you. In other words, I need to change you from who you are today and from how you're living to look a little different so that you can do what I'm going to have you do. And then the third part of that verse was, I'm going to make you what? I'm gonna make you fishers of men. In other words, I got a job for you to do. It's a big job, it's an important job, it's more than a job, it's a mission. And so we said, if we're gonna do that, if we're gonna answer that same call, we need to define it. So an all-in disciple is somebody who knows and follows Jesus, who's being changed by Jesus, and who's committed to the mission of Jesus. And we need to understand that because if we're gonna be people who say we're all in, man, we better be serious about it. Being an all-in disciple of Jesus isn't just knowing who he is. It's not even just saying we're gonna follow him or we're gonna subscribe to what he says. It's not even just saying we're gonna allow him to transform our lives from the inside out. But if we never commit to his mission and to what he wants to do in the world around us and through us, then we're coming up short. And so that's what it looks like to be an all-in disciple. And so if we're gonna do that, we need a clear vision for how we're gonna make it happen. And that's what we started to unpack last week as we again, introduced a brand new vision statement for our church. We simply said, we want to be a church. Our vision is to be people who help people find hope and experience community and live with purpose. And that gets me excited because I see a whole lot of people around me all the time who need those things. I see a whole lot of people who need hope. I see a whole lot of people who need good community. And I see a whole lot of people who are living with no purpose. And that breaks my heart because you only get one life. And I don't want anybody to waste it. So I want to see people find hope and experience community and live with purpose. And then let me connect all these pieces for you, okay? Here's why all these things work together so well. It works together because if I want somebody to find hope, I'm just going to tell you, I believe that happens when somebody knows and follows Jesus. And I want Jesus to be able to change people, but I believe that happens best in community. That's why we want people to experience community. It doesn't happen in rows, it happens in circles. That's why we want every one of you to be in a life group. We want you to have a circle, a community of people where life change can happen. And I want you to be committed to the mission of Jesus because I think that's where we discover our true purpose. If you've ever wondered what you're on this planet to do, man, commit to Jesus' mission and you'll start to find out really quickly. And so our vision, again, is to help people find hope and experience community and live with purpose, because we want people to know and follow Jesus and to be changed by Jesus and to commit to the mission of Jesus, because we want to lead them to be all-in disciples of Jesus, because that's what he told us to do. And so last week we started to talk about what it means to be for the one, but today we're going to pivot and we're going to talk about what it means to be for our city. Because let me tell you something, we are not just in Canton, we are called to be a church that is for Canton. We're not just here to have a building and take up space. We're not just here to have a place to come on Sunday morning so we feel a little better and then we leave and forget about it till the next weekend. We are not just here to pat each other on the back and have some good coffee in the lobby and chat a little bit and then go about our lives. We have a job to do. We have a mission to fulfill. And it's for our city. It's for the people who are around us. And so let me just stop right here. I gave this disclaimer last week, but this seems like a good place to do this again. I just want to talk to you. If you're somebody who would say, I'm not a follower of Jesus today, I just want to say again, you have permission today and all through this series to call me a liar, okay? You have permission to be skeptical. You have permission to not believe a word that I'm saying, because I guarantee you've seen some churches who've talked a good game and they've never put their money where their mouth is. I guarantee you've heard some people say all the right things, then you've seen no action. And if you're hearing me say all this morning and you're thinking, man, this sounds good, but I don't believe it, I'm skeptical, you have permission to do that. But here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. I'm just gonna ask you to lean in and to listen, because what I'm gonna describe for you today is what the church is supposed to look like. And it is the church we aspire to be, and it is the church we're committed to be. And my hope and my prayer is that years from now, our whole community is gonna look back at this moment and they're gonna say, thank God they had that conversation because it changed the look of our community. That's my prayer, okay? So let's talk about why this is so important. I told you last week, not long ago, we did a little demographic research. We started by asking, how far will people drive to come to church? That seemed like a good place to start. So we did a little digging, did a little research, we read up, we went to Google because the internet's never wrong. And we just said, how far will people drive to get to church? And we found that there was research data that shows that the average person who's not connected to a church will drive 15 to 20 minutes to get there. And we said, okay, 15 to 20 minutes, it seems like maybe 7 miles or so. We just picked an arbitrary number that seemed like it fit the drive time. And we said, let's do some demographic research on the people who live within 7 miles of our church. And let's just find out who they are, what they're about, what makes them tick, what are their needs. Let's just learn everything we can learn about the people in our community. And so we did that, and we found out that there are 198,000 people who live within 7 miles of where I'm standing right here today. But the number that stuck out to me was this. We found out that out of those 198,000 people, 68,000 of them have no faith activity. So no connection to a church, no relationship with Jesus. On the faith level, it's like flatline, okay? No faith activity. Now, that means they don't know the hope that I know and the hope that many of you know. And that means that they're not experiencing the community that I experience because my wife and I are in a life group with some really good people from our church. And that means that they haven't discovered what it looks like to live with the purpose that comes from committing to the mission of Jesus and having that to live with and to live from and to operate out of. And that breaks my heart. I don't want that for our community. And I'm just gonna tell you right now, and this might sound, this could be misconstrued to sound a little icky, but hear me out. I'm just gonna tell you right now that everything that I'm gonna describe to you today, everything we're gonna do, we're doing this with an unapologetic agenda. You see, Jesus never truly did anything with no strings attached. There are people who will tell you that he did, but he didn't. Because everything Jesus ever did was to help people see the hope of the Father. And that's our agenda, church. Everything we're gonna do, we're doing with an unapologetic agenda because we want people to see who Jesus is in our lives. And we want people to see what he wants to do in their lives. And so I just want you to know that going in, because what I wanna see in our community is life change. Let me tell you what I mean. I wanna see things like this. I wanna see people meet Jesus every single day. When I look at the early church in Acts chapter 2, that's what we see. Because they were being the church and they were doing what the church was meant to do. We see people meeting Jesus every single day. And I want to see that in our community because we're being the church the way it's meant to be. I want to see this. I want to see healthier marriages and families. And specifically, I said last week, I want to see fewer orphans in our city because we're being the church. How about that? I want to see fewer orphans. I want to see fewer kids who need a loving home waiting for doors to open. We're going to be part of the solution. I want to see us invest in community partnerships, coming alongside organizations, like-minded missions who are doing good kingdom building, community changing work all around us in our city, rather than duplicating what they're doing just to put our logo on it. That doesn't matter. I don't care about that. I want to see us come alongside of them and resource them and support them and encourage them in the good things they're already doing to build the kingdom, not our castle. I want to help them do the good things they're doing in our cities so that more people will experience community and find hope and live with purpose just because we had the backs of some really good people in our city who are doing good things. And my gut tells me as we do, we're going to see better schools, better neighborhoods, and less crime, and it's just going to make life better in our city. I want to see other things. I want to see us being the church by meeting people's physical needs before we try to meet their spiritual needs. Why would I say that? If meeting spiritual needs is the most important thing, why would I say we should meet physical needs first? Because Jesus did. And if he did, there must be something to it. He would heal people and he would feed people. And he took care of physical needs because when he did, all of a sudden the guard came down and doors opened for spiritual conversations to take place. Jesus didn't just go hit them with a scroll, a bunch of Old Testament stuff. He met their physical needs first. And so I want to do that. And we're going to talk today about what that's going to look like for our church. And at the end of the day, what I want to see is I want to see us as a church sending disciple-making disciples out on mission across our city every single day to carry the hope of Jesus to people who don't have it yet. That's what I want to see. That's the kind of life change that I believe we're called to be a part of. Now, those of us who would call ourselves Christians, let me tell you biblically where all this is coming from. Those of us who call ourselves Christians were given two really important instructions by Jesus. The first is in Matthew 28. I shared that a little bit ago when he said, go everywhere, go to all nations, go to all people, make disciples, baptize them, teach them everything, teach them how to do what you're supposed to do, and it'll become this movement, right? That's the Great Commission. But the other important instruction he gave us we find in Matthew chapter 22. We call it the greatest commandment. Maybe you've heard this before. Jesus is teaching, and as it often, almost always happens when he's teaching, the religious leaders get all huffy and up in arms about what he's saying because he's always challenging their authority and the status quo, and they don't like that. They've got pretty tight grip on their power and their authority, and this Jesus that's come onto the scene is really messing things up and making things uncomfortable and uneasy for these religious leaders. And so anytime he's teaching, they'd all get together and they'd try to spoil the party, right? And so there's one group of these religious people called the Sadducees, and they apparently had come to Jesus and just tried to ruin things this day. But Matthew chapter 22 says that they failed at that. So here's what happens starting in verse 34. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. I mean, they're always trying to cause trouble for Jesus. They got together, and one of them, an expert in the law, remember that, he's an expert in the law, he tested Jesus with this question, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Now here's why this is important, and here's why this is a loaded question. In the Jewish law, there were 613 individual rules they had to follow to be considered a fine, upstanding religious citizen. 613 rules. You break one of those, and the Pharisees were quick to gatekeep following Jesus. They were the first people on the scene to tell you, you're not good enough, you're unclean, you ruined it, get out. That was kind of their self-appointed job. They thought they were doing a good thing, maybe somewhere deep down inside, but man, really, they had just made it all about their authority and trying to make themselves look good. And so they throw this expert of the law at Jesus one day. They call in the big guns. They say, we can get him. We can get him to trip over his own words. We can get him to contradict himself. We can get him to say something so controversial that people are going to stop following him, and it's going to mess with the movement. We see the momentum that's building. It's bad news for us. We can surely get him to say something that's just going to turn people off, right? And so they send this expert of the law to come to Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, so there's 613 laws. Which one's the most important? Pick one. And they're thinking they're going to get him to trip up, right? But what he does is he quotes from the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. He says, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Sounds good, right? Love God with everything you have. That's important. But then he goes on and he does one better. Instead of picking one, he picks two. He says, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then he says, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. In other words, if you don't get this right, you might as well forget the other 611. Love God with everything you have. And love your neighbor as you love yourself, and just start there. And here's what he's saying to the Pharisees, okay? I'm reading between the lines a little bit, but there's some context here that explains this, kind of paints this picture. What he's saying is, you guys aren't even very good at this, so what are you worrying about the other 611 for? And I think he would say that to a lot of people who call themselves fine, upstanding religious citizens today. He would say, hey, you need to get back to loving God with everything you have and loving your neighbor as you love yourself. And that's what we're called to do, church. And so we're going to do it. And so let's break this down a little bit. There are two principles that we pull from this verse to love your neighbor as you love yourself. The first is a principle that we're just going to call the proximity principle. Let's talk about this word neighbor, okay? Because many of us, I think, we just breeze by that word, or maybe you've thought about who your neighbor would be and you've said, well, that's my coworkers, or that's my kids' classmates, or that's the people I see, when I go shopping, or that's my friends at church, or my small group, or whatever, and that's who you've come to think of as your neighbor. But when you go back to the original language that the New Testament was written in, if you don't know this, it was not written in English, it was written in mostly Greek and Latin. When you go back to the original language and you look at that word neighbor, it actually translates to a word which is where we get our word near. And so what Jesus is saying here is love the people that you're near. Literally love the people that are around you. Love the people that are nearby. And when some people pressed in and they asked Jesus, okay, tell me more. Who's my neighbor? That's where he tells the parable of the Good Samaritan that we don't really have time to get very far into today. But basically the gist of the story is even people that you have nothing in common with, even people you don't want to like, even people that maybe society says or your brain tells you shouldn't have anything to do with, like those are the people you need to love. And we know this was a big deal to Jesus because he did it all the time. He had dinner with sinners and tax collectors and all the people that he wasn't supposed to hang out with. That's who he spent his time with. And we know he was good at it because people who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. And so the people who you're near, those are your neighbors. And I want to challenge you with this. I want you to understand this morning that God has intentionally placed you near your neighbors. The neighborhood you live in, the street you live in, the house you live in, God's got you there for a reason. And I would take that a step further, and I would say that God has placed your neighbors around you so that you would have an opportunity to share the hope of Jesus with them. And we're called to take that very seriously. That's the proximity principle. God has placed them nearby for you to love them, just like Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So that's the proximity principle. But now let's talk about principle number two, the kindness principle. Because he doesn't just say, wave to your neighbors. He doesn't just say, say hi when you see him on the street. He says, it goes way further than that. He says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Let's talk about what that means. I think we get hung up on this word love, okay? Because I've heard people say things like this, and maybe you've heard people say things like this. I love them, I just don't like them. Did you ever hear anybody say that before? I love them, I just don't like them. What? How do you do that? I don't even know what that means. If you could explain that to me, come talk to me after church, because I don't understand what that means. How can you love somebody but not like them? But let's go with it. What if Jesus had said, hey, here's what I want you to do. Like your neighbor. What if he didn't get hung up on the word love? What if he said, I just want you to like your neighbor the way you like yourself? Think about what would happen if we started to figure that out, because I think we get hung up on this word love and we talk ourselves out of doing some of the things Jesus wants us to do because love, that's a little extreme. We're going a little far with that, right? Just like your neighbor as you like yourself. I don't know, maybe that's an easier way to think about this. But the bottom line is this: Jesus is calling us to invest in our neighbors. And he's calling us to sacrifice for our neighbors. And ultimately, he's calling us to show the love of God to our neighbors. And I want to tell you something. I love it that we're a church that believes so strongly in supporting missions all across the world. I love it that we're going to have the Bungus here with us next week. I love it that we're raising money for a hospital in Africa. I love it that we have missionaries in Haiti and England and other corners of the world. I love that stuff. But listen to me. It is very easy to get so enamored or so passionate or so caught up in what we're doing to support the work of God across the globe that we forget about the people down the street. And I hope that we don't do that. I hope that we don't do that because the people around us matter a whole lot to Jesus. In fact, they mattered to some people a long time ago who got together and said, hey, we need to start a church in Canton. Way, way, way back in the middle of the 19th century, these people got together and they said, Canton, we need to start a church. And so they got together and they started First Christian Church. And now for decades and decades and decades and decades, this church has had this rich history and legacy of taking care of our community in some different ways. And we want to continue that vision. And just like we often say, the best is yet to come, I believe there are bigger and better things ahead of us than even what lies behind us. Even the great things that we've been blessed to be a part of as a church, even before many of us in the room or all of us in the room were alive, like this church was doing good things in the community, but we've got a big job out in front of us to do. And so I want to spend a few minutes talking about what some of that looks like. I want to explain how we're going to continue that legacy in the future. Let me start with this. Going back to that research that we did, we started looking into, these 198,000 people and specifically 68,000 people who have no relationship with Jesus. What are the needs that they have? What are the questions they're asking? And what are their concerns? And we started to uncover some things, and we honed in on 5. And what we did is we called out these 5 areas and we said, these are the 5 areas where we want to speak directly into making things in our community better. The first area is in the area of financial stability. Everybody in the world is freaking out about money right now and inflation and the economy and worrying about how to make ends meet and how to put a roof over how do I put a roof over my family's head? How do I pay my bills? How do I save or ever put money back for retirement or any of those things? And so what we've determined is in each of these 5 areas, we've kind of nailed down like a baseline question that we see people asking or that research has shown that people are asking. And so in the area of financial stability, people are asking, how much is really enough? I don't know how we're going to make it. And here's the deal. We've also identified a question we want to ask to make sure we're doing a good job of pointing people to biblical truth and real help. And so in this area, we said, we want to ask this question. Are we doing a good job of helping people find peace and contentment? Now, that might seem a little loftier up in the clouds to you. Maybe you're thinking, why wouldn't your question be like, how are we helping people learn how to budget? Or how are we helping people learn how to save? And you know what? We do those things. We have financial coaching and things you can be a part of here if you want that financial help. We do those things and we're going to continue to do those things. But let me tell you something. And if you're hearing me talk about money and you're like, that's one of my concerns today, then I lean in for this, okay? You can learn how to budget, you can learn how to save, you can learn how to give, you can learn how to manage your money, but if you never learn to trust Jesus, you're never gonna have peace in the area of finance in your life. And so we don't just wanna teach people to budget, we will. We don't just wanna teach people to manage money, we will. But we wanna teach people to find contentment and peace by teaching them to trust Jesus. So that's area number 1. Area number 2 is parenting and kids and family. And specifically, we see parents asking this question. Am I doing it right? Am I creating a monster? 20 years from now, is my kid gonna be in therapy undoing what I just did, right? If you've been a parent for any time at all, you've asked that question. Am I doing it right? And so we've said, we wanna ask this question. Are we teaching parents or grandparents or foster parents or adoptive parents or aunts or uncles, anybody who's raising anybody, are we teaching them, are we equipping them to lead their family well? We want to ask that question. The third area is the area of belonging. We see a whole bunch of people all over the place asking the question, where do I fit? Where do I fit in? Where's my place? And so we've said we want to ask the question, are we doing a good job of making sure every person feels seen and heard and understood and known and loved? Okay, so keep going. The fourth area is the area of identity. A whole bunch of people who are asking the question, who am I? And the question that we want to ask is, are we doing a good job of making sure people know that they have inherent worth and purpose that's God-given? Because if we can respond to that need, a lot of the rest of the need in that area will begin to take care of itself. And so the question we want to ask is, are we doing a good job of helping people understand and believe that they have an inherent worth and purpose that's God-given? The fifth and final area is the area of mental health. And we just see people all over asking, why do I feel this way? And is there any hope for me? And we want to ask the question, how are we guiding people toward hope and healing? And I want you to notice that those two things go hand in hand. We don't just want to guide people toward hope. Hope is great. Hope is so critically important to mental health, but we don't just want to say, hey, there's hope for you, just read your Bible a little more. Hey, there's hope for you, just pray a little more. It'll be great. You're going to feel better tomorrow, right? That doesn't help anybody. Because if you've ever wrestled with this, you know it doesn't work that way. We also don't want to just guide people toward healing. It's not just about counseling. It's not just about a prescription. It's not just about, getting better people around you. They go hand in hand. It's a package deal. And so as a church, we want to be part of solutions in the area of mental health, and we want to help people find both hope and healing. And so we took those 5 areas, and we began to break them down, and we began to put some strategy around them. And I want to explain some things about how this is going to change the way that we function in the future. We've outlined some plans, okay? And I want to share these with you because I want to challenge you. I just want you to get excited about it. I am excited about it, and I think you will be too, but I want you to start to think about where you fit into this, okay? So let me give you a few examples of some things that we're starting to develop. The first thing we've said is the way we've said this is we just want to activate this campus. In other words, we're here, this is a beautiful facility, a beautiful piece of property, but if we're going to be here, we better get every dime worth of value out of this place. And so we want to start to use it in bigger and better ways. We want to make this a destination for the community, not to come here to church, but to come here because this is a community gathering space. And so maybe we start to open the cafe more through the week. Maybe we use this to host events for more schools or for more community groups, like the Stark Board of Disability that meets here and does things here, teachers groups that come here and do their yearly training and continuing education events, or the Mental Health and Recovery Board who comes here and uses our facility a couple times a year. We want to do more of that stuff and open our doors to the community to let them use it for things they need. And we want them, honestly, I just want people to start to frequently get used to coming here, because then maybe it's easier to come back on Sunday. I don't know. We want to use it for that. We want to use this as a place where people can come and they can have fun. We want to create spaces on our property where we're just letting people gather to have a good time. And we want to get the most value we can get out of this property, because it's just a building until we make it a tool. So we're going to make it a tool, okay? And we want to create clean and safe and comfortable spaces for community to happen. Let me talk to you about multi-site for just a minute. We've been talking about launching another campus for a couple of years now, and COVID really messed with that, but we're back on that. And I just want to tell you where our model is changing a little bit. I want you to know that when it comes to multi-site, our goal is not to move into a neighborhood and plant a church. That might sound counterintuitive to you, but our goal is not to move into a neighborhood and just plant a church and say, hey, come to church Sunday. That's not the goal. If Jesus was about meeting physical needs before he met spiritual ones, then we're going to do the same. And so wherever we go into a neighborhood and put a location, I want to tell you, we're going to meet physical needs first. Here's what I mean. I see our multi-site locations providing clothing. I see our multi-site locations providing food. I see our multi-site locations providing counseling. I see our multi-site locations being a place where people can come to find a mentor. I see our multi-site locations being a place maybe where we're doing oil changes and basic car mechanics for single moms. I see them being a place where we can offer showers and laundry to people who are living in their cars and they don't have a place to take a shower and do their laundry. I see our locations being a place that maybe houses a medical clinic where we can do blood pressure checks and eye screenings and dental cleanings for kids. I see it being a place where we can do free haircuts and back to school drives, and we can have prom dress giveaways for girls that can't afford a new new dress off the rack. I see them being a place where we're teaching job skills and we're helping people write resumes and we're helping with job placement. I see them being a place where we continue to teach English as a second language like we're already doing. I see them being a place where like we already give away diapers and cribs to moms that can't afford them. I see these multi-site locations being a place where we're giving diapers and cribs away for new moms. I see these being places that are hosting nonprofits that can't afford to go lease office space, and they have big visions for how they want to make our city better, but they just need a place to work from. And we'll say, hey, we got a place, come use ours. I see it being that. I see shared working spaces for people to use just to be around other people and have community. Guys, if we're going to go into a neighborhood, we're not just going to say come to church, we're going to go meet some needs. We're going to be part of the solution. We're going to make our city better. Oh, and by the way, all the while we'll be saying, hey, just so you know, a church meets here on Sunday. If you want to come, we'd love to have you. We're going to continue to invest in community partnerships, like our partnership with the Canton Christian Home and the Christian Children's Home of Ohio and Refuge of Hope and Ability Ministry that our own Ryan Wolf is the national director of. You may not even know that, but his full-time gig is to help churches start disability ministries. We're going to continue to support them and the Pregnancy and Parenting Center and Refuge of Hope and our newest mission partner, the director sitting right there, my friend Joe Franz, who started a nonprofit called Brew Pastors. It's meeting people in the darkest and most hopeless moments of their life and pointing them to Jesus. We're going to invest more in those community partnerships because they are building the kingdom and they're making our community better. And instead of just doing what they're going to do again and sticking our logo on it, we're going to have their backs and we're going to help them do more good things. That's going to be a way that we're part of the solution. We are going to be a part of the solution in the area of fostering and adoption. Listen to me. There will be fewer orphans in Stark County because of First Christian Church. I would bet my last dollar there's a family in our church who's felt called to foster or adopt, and they didn't do it because they didn't know where to start. And so we're going to offer education, and we're going to offer training, and we're going to have partnerships we'll establish with local agencies. We're even talking about some grants that we'll be able to award to some families to help make it more financially possible. And here's why. I heard this recently, and it blew my mind and broke my heart. I'm going to try to hold it together. But I heard this number. You ready? If one family from every church in the state of Ohio would adopt one child, there would not be an orphan left in the state. Think about that. One family from every church in the state of Ohio would adopt one child. There would not be a kid left without a family. Come on. We're going to be part of the answer. We're going to be part of the answer. We're going to be part of good things that are happening in our community. We're going to come alongside people just to encourage them, just to be a light in our community. Guys, I could keep talking for an hour, but here's the point. Okay, the point is we're going to be a church that's known for what we're for. And last week I posed this question. I said, if we, First Christian Church, if we just cease to exist, and I challenge you to think about this, if we just cease to exist, would our community notice? Would they hear about it later? Or even worse, would they care? Would it matter? And if I die trying, we're going to make sure the answer to that question is absolutely yes, they would notice. And my hope and my prayer is that if it ever got out in our community that we were going to close our doors, there would be people lined up outside to protest because they would say, it's too important. We need that church. They're making our community better. They're making our city better. They're making lives better. They're part of the answer. They helped me find hope and experience community and live with purpose, and they need to do that for more people. That's my prayer. But now let me rephrase that question. I don't want to wrap up with this. I want to challenge you to think about this. I'm going to bring it all the way back, okay? I want to talk about you. Because it's got to start with you. So let me ask this question. If you moved, I'm going to rephrase the question, okay? Not if we closed our doors, but if you moved, would your neighbors notice? Would they throw a party? Would they care? I hope the answer to that's yes. And so I don't know what your next step is. I don't know what you need to do. Maybe you just need to start by being nice. Don't be the get off my lawn guy in your neighborhood, okay? Maybe you just need to come outside and wave at some people once in a while. Or maybe you need to do some of these things. Maybe you're hearing me talk about all this morning and you're thinking, oh, well, that sounds great, but how do I get involved in some of that? Maybe the place to start is to go to firstchristian.com/discover and take the spiritual gifts assessment to find out a little more about how God wired you and where you fit in all this. Maybe you want to start there. Maybe you need to take a walk today in between the football games. I know we have football to watch. This is my favorite time of year, by the way, because the weather's changing. I love hoodie weather. Anybody else love hoodie weather? And the leaves are turning, and the Guardians are a game up on the Yankees, and the Browns aren't statistically eliminated from the playoffs yet. So it's a great time of year. So get out today after the game and go take a walk in your neighborhood, and just as you're walking, pray for your neighbors. And just say, God, the people who live in these houses, give me opportunities to bring hope to them. Maybe you do that. Maybe trick-or-treating's coming up, and you might be somebody who loves Halloween and you're all about it, or you might be somebody who's upset that I'm even bringing it up right now, and you'll email me later and I won't read it. But here's the thing, trick-or-treating is unique because it's the one time a year that perfect strangers literally knock on your door. So use it. Here's a shameless plug. If you go to firstchristian.com/podcasts, we have a podcast we just relaunched called the All for the One podcast, and we released an episode this Wednesday where we shared some really simple practical ideas for how to use trick-or-treating to reach your neighbors. So use it. Man, they're coming to you. Turn your light on. Don't give out granola bars, okay? Buy king-size candy bars or something. Give good candy, okay? Or else don't wear an FCC shirt when you give out bad candy. Use it. They're coming to you. Right? I can keep going. I can give you more ideas. Maybe you just need to do this. I challenged you with this last week. If you haven't done it yet, I'm going to challenge you again. Just identify your one. Who's the person that Jesus put in your circle to reach? And reach them. Start praying, God, give me the opportunity and the courage. God, give me the opportunity and the courage. God, give me the opportunity and the courage. I'm telling you, church, if we miss opportunities to reach people, it's not because there aren't opportunities. It's because we're too busy or we chickened out. So God, give me the opportunity and the courage. Call out your one, name them. Maybe it's the guy next door. Wherever you're going to start, I just want to challenge you, start dreaming and start praying, because there are big, exciting things ahead, and we're going to look back years from now, and I just think we're going to be blown away by what happened. And it started with this conversation, and my prayer is that it gains momentum to where we're going to see how God moved in our city and things changed just because we were faithful. That's all we can do. God handles the rest. But buckle up, because it's about to get really good. God, thanks so much for what you're doing in our city. Use us any way you want to. Give us opportunities. Give us courage. And God, my prayer is that just because we're available, people would find hope and experience community and live with purpose, and they would understand the joy and the fulfillment there is to be found when we journey with you. We're here for you. We're here to be used. God, do what you want. Use us. We love you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.